Hey everybody, Josh from Populi here. We're going to go through setting up aid, all the things you need to do to set up aid in order to be able to process aid for your school. This has kind of a forking path. So there's going to be aspects of this that will be common between schools that have the DOED integration in place and those that don't. So this is really a video that will serve both of those kinds of users. Um, but then we have another video that goes in depth about various aspects of the DOED integration, and we'll link that for you off of this video. The only thing that you actually have to do to get aid set up is pretty simple. Really, you just need to set up a few liability accounts in your financial department, in your accounting chart of accounts there. And then you need to associate your various aid types that you're going to be processing with those liability accounts. That's most of what you would need to do. The other thing that you would probably want to do is if you have institutional aid, you would need to set those up as well. But really, it's just that. There's the accounting for liability accounts for your aid types, at whatever level you're going to handle those. Those need to be set up, created, and associated with your aid types. Now, on top of that, there are a lot of other functionality, different features and things that help you manage aid well for your institution. And so you would most likely want to have those set up as well. Those aren't strictly speaking required though. Those would be things like aid classifications, aid year schedules, all kinds of different things. So one of our goals is to show you what's required and what's optional. But then another thing we're going to do as you're setting up aid, just so you can have an idea of kind of what you're shooting for, we're going to walk you through what the aid process looks like in Populi. We're going to do that as a flyover, and then we're going to do that in a little more depth. And before we get to those other things required or the things that are optional or nice to have, we're going to talk about just going through that whole aid process so you can have that in your mind. So let's go through that flyover of the aid process. An ISIR comes into Populi. Typically, this would be you downloading a batch of ISIRs and then uploading it to your instance of Populi. Then you'll work through that batch, associating each ISIR with a person in Populi. When you associate that ISIR with a person in Populi, you're going to create an aid application for them. Once you have that aid application, there are various things that are set up there. Cost of attendance, you'll get the EFC coming in from the ISIR, so you'll have that aid application going. And then you may have various aid components, things that you need to work through with students so that they can get that set up properly and they're all ready to go and be processed. Once their aid application's all managed, you'll be able to create awards and disbursements. You'll create those awards and disbursements on the student's profile. And then once you have everything set in place there for your various students, you'd be able to, as you approach the disbursement dates that come up there, go ahead and put them into batches and begin to disperse that aid. That takes us into that batch process of disbursements. And that's basically a series of steps that you walk through, complete with that financial aid department to the business office or finance department handoff that happens about midway there in that process. Once you make that handoff, your finance department, somebody with financial admin or student billing role, will finish that aid process and post those awards to student accounts. So that money becomes real at that point. After that, it's a matter of refunding to students. They have, aid that goes above and beyond their current charges. You'd be able to refund to them. And then you're also able to refund to source. So situations where someone withdraws and owes money back to the feds, you'd be able to process those kinds of situations as well and get that money returned to source as far as your accounting and everything goes there. Obviously, if you're not integrated with the DOED, you would be working in parallel. So you're recording things and Populi that you're also doing in another aid software there. So ISIRs come into the system, you associate that with a person in Populi, that creates an aid application. Then you manage the aid application, you set up awards with disbursements on students, then we include those disbursements in a batch, we process that batch, then we manage refunds to students and refunds to sources. That's the flyover process there. Now what we're going to do is go in a little more depth into Populi, into the software itself actually, and then look at some of these different processes and flesh that out a little bit. The first step is to get those ISIRs. You'll download them typically from EdConnect. You'll pull them down onto your hard drive on your computer, and then you'll come over to Populi. You'll go to Financial, Financial Aid, Aid Applications, and then right there you'll see ISIRs. And then right here you have an option to upload ISIRs. With that file on your hard drive, you just come right here, click this, find that file or drag it from somewhere else here, and then upload that to Populi. Once you do that, you're going to get ISIR files just like this here. Once you have that batch of ISIRs uploaded, you're going to go and click into the batch, and then we're going to go just clicking ahead through some of these to an ISIR that hasn't yet been associated with a person in Populi. So that's what we have here. And you can see you'll have a few options. One option will be just to create a new person based off of this. You'll be able to link it to someone else, someone that you choose. So you can just search for somebody here, find them, and then attach that ISIR to them. Or you can go with the recommendation that we're making. What we're looking here is for a match between first and last name, the social security number if it's available, and the birth date if that's available. So if we have those things and everything looks right as far as we're concerned, we'll make a guess and say we think this person is the one who should get this ISIR. Then you're able to add a new admissions lead. That's part of the process here. When you connect this ISIR and import it over here, a new admissions lead will be created on a person's profile. So if they already have one, that will be inactivated, and then this new one will be in its place there. If they don't have one, it'll add a new one there. And then a new aid application will be created. And this is where you can choose the classification here. We'll get into the classification more a little bit later. But just so you know, you're able to choose a classification there. That's going to supply things like your cost of attendance. That's a good step to take right here. It'll save you time down the road. That new aid application is the next step. So after we've imported this, we're going to go look at that. Now that we have that ISIR linked up, we can go right to that student's profile, and then to financial, and then to financial aid. And then for that aid year, we got to make sure we've got the correct aid year selected. We're going to go down here and you'll see that CPS transaction shows up over there. So that's the full ISIR itself. You can click in there. All that information is there on the profile. But the main thing that we're concerned with here is, again, that process. So we've gone from ISIR to aid application. Now we have this aid application right here. So on the aid application, you can see kind of all the different factors here. We've got the status, verification, students selected for verification. You can set them up here. They'll be in progress until you complete them. But then once they're completed, you'll show that on the aid application there. So you can keep track of that way. We've got their dependency, then we've got their classification. Remember, we hooked them up with a classification ahead of time. So that fills in various details here. Most importantly, the cost of attendance over here. So that's how we get that showing up on the aid application. Typically, the EFC would show up as well when you have a live ISIR that actually contains the expected family contribution, then that would automatically populate the aid application there. So with the aid classification and the EFC together, then you get what you need to show COA and EFC, and of course, remaining need. Other details like this would come in with that as well. Then you can also see the components on the application right here over on the right. So that's going to be anything that you need to get from the student or any internal process that you have, you're able to set up, and all of these aid components are set up manually. So you'll go in and set up those to reflect your process, everything that you need to do to get them set up and ready for aid. And then you'll be able to just go through and check those off. So we're going to go ahead and include these and then save right here. And then we can see that these components show up right there. As someone completes these components, you're able to go in here, click on those, click accepted, and then save. And then you're able to see, okay, this is where they are in their process. This is what they've completed. And then these are the things here that are still pending, that are outstanding. And of course, you can also set them to say rejected, to say, yeah, we got something from them, but that won't work. We need something else, etc. I want to real quick show you what the student would see here. They're able to see kind of similar bits of information. You can set these components so that they can or cannot be seen by the student, something to be aware of. So for internal processes, you would make that invisible to the student so the student doesn't see that. The big thing here to be aware of is that students can ask questions and they can also submit files. So if you have something, some documentation you need from them here as one of those components, then we're going to end up being able to have them submit that via a file right there. Go back to the admin view. We've got an ISIR coming in, hooking up to that aid application. And now with the aid application in place, the next step is to add awards and disbursements. We're on the student's profile. We'll go to financial aid. We're going to click add. Under aid type here, we'll click DL and sub. And then we're just going to add $1,000 right there. We're going to make this award offered. You can go ahead and set it right to accepted if that's the way you process things, or you can just set it to offered there until the student accepts or until you move them forward. We're going to give this a date in the fall here. And we're going to say that we're going to disperse $500 here. And then I'm going to click add that scheduled disbursement. So now that we've got an award with a scheduled disbursement in place there. You could, of course, go in and set up the spring term too. We're just doing an example and we'll do it this way. Quick note here, this is where aid year schedules can come into play because you saw that we just manually added that disbursement, but it's also possible to have an aid year schedule automatically input those dates there to save a little time. I'm going to save that. Okay, so now we have an award with a disbursement already set up there, ready to go. The next step after this will be as we approach that disbursement date, we'll actually want to go ahead and disperse the aid. So now that we have that created, we can just go to financial up at the top and then financial aid and then disbursement batches. Then we'll click new batch. So you can see that we're already showing everything that we want to here. But if we needed to make any changes, we can put in whatever dates we want right here in the scheduled fields for those dates so that we get the disbursements we want here. We're also looking at the unsubsidized direct loan right now. So just by checking that right there, we're able to get those. Now, you'll see that there's an issue here. We have pages app status showing up as in progress. That's a potentially a common error there. So I'll show you how to deal with that real quick. We're going to jump over to Pages Profile here. Make sure we're looking at the correct aid year. We're going to go to this aid application right here. We're going to set the status to completed, and then we'll save. Now, when we come back here, we're able to refresh, and you can see page shows up, and we can check the box for her. Her application status is now completed, so she can be included in a batch. I'm going to click Create this batch with just her. So once we have that in place, we're then able to go ahead and walk her through these steps. These steps reflect steps that you are hopefully taking on your own outside of Populi. We, of course, are showing an integrated version of this right here. You can see the COD status, but the same basic process exists for you if you're not DOED integrated. So, and this is just a matter of just advancing to the next stage on each of these. And there's a handoff that happens on this step between financial aid and your business finance office there to actually disperse aid. So if you're the financial aid person, you would get through to this point and then allow someone with either the financial admin or student billing role to take over here and finish the batch. The one that's a little different here is this posted to student accounts step. This step allows you to set a posted date. We default to the current date. We assume that you're dispersing aid on the date that you are working through currently. You can change that date if you've executed, your disbursement elsewhere and are just recording it in Populi, whatever you judge to be the correct way of handling that there. You're able to do that right there. Then you can also choose whether or not you want to notify students by email. When you if you choose to notify by email, you can choose where you want those replies to go to, and then what the text of that email should be. This can be set up as a default over in settings, financial aid settings. There's an option to set that up, but you can see that you have a few variables there. So when this goes out to that student, it will show their first name, their amount for their award, the name of the award, all that. Those variables get filled in. So even if you have a whole list of students here, each student gets a personalized email there. Then the way to finish this up is just to click Complete Batch there. Now that's been posted to Page's account. And the next thing we'll do is just go have a quick look at that. When we go to Page's profile, right here, we can see that the status on that disbursement is posted. Then we'll go over to the profile here, and you can see, we have an aid payment. Now, in many situations, of course, you'll already have an invoice in place. So this aid payment would attach to that invoice and pay it down. You can see that we're affecting the account balance right there. So this is exactly what we'd expect to see. The next thing you're going to do is manage aid refunds, and that would be either refunds to student or refunds to source. They both work a little bit differently. You can see that because this aid payment isn't attached to anything, you have the option up here to refund a credit balance. So let's say we wanted to refund some of this money directly to the student. That is what's handled here under refund credit balance. Refunds to source happen elsewhere. So let's look at refunding this to student. When we choose a refund source, we can choose the level at which we want to demonstrate where this aid payment is or where this refund is coming from. So if we choose federal aid, then we're just kind of giving a general category there. So obviously the unsubsidized direct loan is part of federal aid, but let's say you had a Pell Grant or something else showing up here too, and you were going to kind of refund them as one chunk, then you could do that by just doing federal aid. But we can also get specific. So we're going to do $95 of that unsub direct loan out of a total of $495, and then refund that to the student. We're going to say that we're recording a check just for our example here, and then click save. And so now you can see that we're actually reflecting that this aid has been refunded to the student right there. And so now that's reduced the balance as it should. The other way, refunding to source, works by going, first of all, to that student's financial aid tab, and then down here and clicking refund to source on the award that we want to refund out of. Okay, we're going to process this as a refund going out today, so we'll leave that there, and then we'll do it for a total of $100 right there. So this is, of course, in situations like a student withdraws and you're doing an R2T4, you would manage that this way, or anything else where you need to refund aid to source. We're going to save that. So now this is scheduled. To actually process this, we're going to step through a quick batch. To do that, we go up to financial, and then financial aid, and then a disbursement batch. But of course, we're going to be executing this as a refund source. So we'll click new batch. And then here under batch type, we'll say refund to source. And now you can see that, again, we've got the unsub direct loan showing up. We've got the date set to contain this scheduled date here. And then we're ready to go to actually create a batch for this. Then it's a little bit simpler setup. We're just kind of adjusting some transactions, but it has, the same kind of advance to next stage process here. We can, again, let a student know what's happening by sending an email, and you can change the posted date there as well. I'm going to click advance to next stage, and then we'll complete the batch. That done, we're going to go back to Pages Profile. You can see that this has all been posted. That's good to see there. We can go to Dashboard, and then we can see where we're at. So now we've posted an aid payment of $495. We've refunded $95 to the student, and we've sent $100 back to source. Okay, with that done, we've seen basically the whole aid process. ISIRs get connected to students. Then we get an aid application based off of that. Then we're able to go in and add awards and disbursements. We can include those disbursements in batches, and then we can process those batches and post to student accounts. With that done, we actually go in and refund to students or sources. That covers all of the basic actions you would undertake to manage aid. Again, the point of this is we want to talk about, some other setup things, but it's good to have this basic process in your mind as we look at how we're going to manage setup, which is what we'll do next. So now we're going to cover what's actually required. And again, it's pretty simple as for what's just required to be able to do anything with aid at all. And then we'll get into in a little bit what's probably required, things you would probably want to set up and work on in order to manage aid. The first thing that we're going to need is we're going to have to think about how we want to be able to show on the accounting side what's happening with aid. The basic thing that we're shooting for here is to take an aid type or all of your aid types and associate them with a liability account. We have to have a liability account to show how that money is being handled there. That's required in the system there. But you could potentially, and different schools do different things here, have a single federal aid account, and then all of the transactions on the accounting side just point back to that aid account. Or you could be more specific. could have a Pell account and an unsub account and a subsidized direct loan account and all these different types there to show very specifically the level that's happening there. What you choose to do there is up to you, but you'll need to create any of those accounts to be able to associate those award types with a specific account. Just as a quick note, most of what we've seen so far is really a function of the financial aid role. But this part of it, you would need to have the financial admin role or somebody with that role to be able to manage the chart of accounts here. So if you go to accounting under financial here, and then to chart of accounts, we can add an account. We're going to add an account. I'm just going to give it kind of a random sequence of numbers here. And then we will do we'll call it unsub DL right there. You could describe it if you need to. And then the type that we're going to set is liability. With that, we're just going to click save. And now we should have unsub DL with that number right there. No activity associated with it here on our chart of accounts. We would do that for any other award levels that we want to do. We're just going to do the one, and we're choosing to point a specific aid type at a specific account here. That's the first part of it. We have the account in place, but now we're going to go and actually hook that up properly. To do that, we'll go to financial aid, come over here to settings, and then we'll go to award types. Now you can see we've got the unsubsidized direct loan down here. I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to choose the correct liability account there. All of the accounts that are listed are going to be liability accounts, and there's the one I created. I'll click save. Now those are connected. And again, that's pretty much all you need to do. You would do this for anything that you want to disperse. You're going to do it for your federal aid types. And if you have institutional aid that you want to show, you would do that as well. Get everything hooked up properly so that you're able to actually point an award at a specific account. Once you've got that, you can work on student accounts and do this. Again, pretty much everything that's actually required there to set up. But there are a lot of other things that are nice to have and that pretty much everyone who's going to process aid in Populi will use. The rest of what we want to set up here will be managed under financial aid. And then over here, we've got settings down here under financial aid. If you click on settings, you'll land on general settings, but then we've got all these different items as well. We're going to skip around a little bit here to focus on kind of different things that are important at different levels. The first one we're going to manage is your aid classification. Aid classifications are here to enable you to do a couple of different things. Their primary function is to show program cost of attendance on a student's profile on their aid application. That's the main thing that it's doing, but it also ends up connecting to COA categories. Those are the cost of attendance categories, which are what enables you to show different levels of detail on your college financing plan. So that's one way that it goes. So this is kind of a hub for that. But then it's also a hub for aid year schedules. So we talked a little bit initially about how an aid classification can have a specific schedule for a specific award type, and that's going to be managed here too. So it's kind of at a midpoint. It's got a primary function and then a couple of secondary functions as well. When you're thinking about how to manage your aid classifications, and this should be obvious, what you're really considering is where the distinctions in your pricing for your program happens. So some institutions have different programs that have very different costs associated with them. Maybe there's an art degree that has a lot of additional costs for studio space or different media kind of costs to buy supplies. So it just has a different set of costs associated with it than an English degree. There might be a distinction there. So you would need to make sure that art students get one cost and English students get a different cost. But then, of course, full-time, part-time, all those different designations there also make a difference for their cost of attendance. Housing makes a difference there too. Are these students going to be on campus or off campus? So you end up needing to kind of figure out how you're going to create those aid classifications to best reflect those different costs of attendance. Of course, the FSA handbook has all kinds of guidelines about exactly how to do that. We're not going to spend time talking about those distinctions here, but that's of course what you want to think about as you're setting up aid classifications. So we'll go ahead and just as an example, look through the full-time undergraduate aid classification. If you choose one, this is what if you choose to add one, which you'll do, this is what it looks like. We'll see what we've already got here under full-time graduate. First of all, we've got a name, we've got a program cost of attendance with on-campus versus off-campus. Those are the same amounts. We'll change that a little bit just for the sake of making things a little different. We will also look at these program COA categories. Of course, you'll define these before you come in here, just so you're aware. You're able to add those different items in there and then define the actual costs associated with each of those different types of categories there. The other big one to be aware of here is that you can toggle on and off campus. So if everything's the same for both, then you can just have one, or if you're setting these up so that one classification looks at one of those on campus or off campus, you can do that. But you can also just within a single classification make this setting here. And so then we can adjust these amounts a little bit there and show those two different amounts so that when a student is set up as on campus or off campus, they automatically get the correct cost of attendance for them. We can set the enrollment so that we know how to trigger that as well here. This will be full-time enrollment. And then you can set your program months as well. Now, the other thing that you're able to do is choose which aid components, which financial aid components match this aid classification here. So this means that when you add the aid classification, you automatically get these other components. We should have talked a little bit about this, I believe, already. Those aid components are just a checklist of things that you require from the student or that you're doing on your own. They're defined over here under aid application components, and then you can include them on a specific classification right there. We'll save that, and that'll have just a few changes associated with that. So then the next job here is just to go through and create all those aid classifications at whatever level you need to. Let's take a quick look at COA categories. These are those categories that you're able to select on the aid classification as you're setting those up or making modifications after they've already been created there. So you can create them here, and then as you can see, you can associate them with different types. These types will correspond to the college financing plan. So the college financing plan has specific types there, and then your categories need to feed into one of those types so that the college financing plan knows the amounts to insert. But they won't make a distinction like required supplies and required texts. If that's something you guys do, you can still show that as part of your COA category on your aid classification, but those need to both map into a category that the college financing plan will recognize, like books and supplies. So these required supplies, required texts, both the costs associated with that will both hit the college financing plan as a single line item. $1,000 in supplies and $2,000 in books or whatever, then $3,000 will be what shows up on the college financing plan under books and supplies. Let's hop over and take a look at aid year schedules. Remember, aid year schedules are how you're able to easily provide disbursement dates on a specific award as you're creating it. So if we click add a schedule here and give it a name, we'll say full-time undergrad. And then down here, we're able to decide which terms these disbursements are actually going to hit. So we'll give a fall and we'll give a disbursement date in the fall there. And then we'll have that there. And then we also want to do one in the spring here. So now we've set those disbursement dates there. Then we would choose which of the classifications we want to associate that with. So right here, we're going to choose full-time undergraduate. And then we'll choose which aid type we want this to affect. And we're going to choose, for our example, unsubsidized direct loan. You could have this across what other aid types you want, so that when you go and create an award from that aid type, this is what it looks at to supply those disbursement dates. And then we'll save. Now I want to real quick go look at a student and create an award there so we can see what this does. So we're going to go to this student right here, financial aid, of course. And then you can see that this student has the correct, or doesn't have the correct aid classification. We'll add that real quick. Full-time undergraduate and save. It's got this correct stuff over here, but then we're going to click add right here and then choose DLN sub. Now you can see that we automatically added those disbursements. When I add an amount here, then we get those added. Okay, so instead of having to walk through and choose each individual date and amount, we just set it once on the aid year schedule, hook it up to this classification and this award, and then save. Now we have an award with those disbursements. So you can see how that potentially saves a lot of time. Let's go back and look at a couple other things that you might want to set up under financial aid. Real quick, we'll look at aid application components. This is where any step that you want to take as an institution or that you need students to take is managed. So let's click add component, and we'll just do kind of a generic component here. We'll say that this is a request for documentation. And then we'll give some quick instructions. Okay, so when a student comes into Populi and they go there, they'll see files over on the right, and they would be able to upload a document there. So this is just a way for you to give them those instructions and for them to come into Populi and do that. So this is something we would want to make visible to the students so they're able to see that. But if you leave that off, that would typically be something that's just something that you all need to do as part of your internal process. That's how adding an aid component works. We've already seen award types. Obviously, this is where you would add any additional award types that you have as an institution, and then manage where everything's set up, where stuff is pointed account-wise, how it's being reported here, and so on. Let's take a quick look at the college financing plan components. These are just a few fields that you're able to add there to give a little more information about those items there. One of the big things here that can be useful as you're managing financial aid, if you have different things that you require or something that we don't track, custom fields are a really easy way to associate different kinds of information with a student's profile. And they're largely accessible from various other points in Populi. So if you're reporting on something, you would be able to set these custom fields up, add them to student profiles, and then do queries in various tables in Populi to be able to pull these students up together. There's lots that you can do here. Again, this is a way of tracking additional information that you need that's not associated with fields that are already in Populi. Let's just look at a couple options here, just so that you can get an idea of what kinds of things show up. These custom fields here, we can have a text input. So that means that you just have a spot that says custom field, whatever the field is, and then you have them input some information there, or you would be inputting that information. You're just typing it in. You can select, and basically then you go, well, we're going to create these various options here. And then they can select from options that you define for them. It's a way of keeping data pretty clean, rather than having your staff type stuff in, misspellings and just different ways of handling things. This enables you to keep everybody on the same page there. Check boxes, and then radio buttons, all kinds of things there. Another big one would be files. So this is where you define a file, and then you can upload things to student profiles and store them all there together and see them on the financial aid tab on a student's profile. Data permissions are useful so that you can say, well, this is something about this student that we don't want them to have access to, or we want them to be able to see it, or we want them to be able to see it and edit it. So custom fields on financial aid can be helpful just to round out the sorts of things that you're tracking for students. Let's look at SAP real quick. We're going to do this as in pretty general terms. So let's look at what adding one looks like, just so you can get an idea here. Basically, you can define these different fields, and then you can also dig in and set the way that your review action works right there. It's pretty much all you have. So you can set these to whatever, however you guys are going to manage things there. Good thing to keep in mind is this will help you flag various aspects of a student's profile. So if we're looking under reporting and academic progress, and then we have calculated SAP right here, you will see, for instance, let's go in and give this guy a warning for that term. He'll show up with a warning. So that would happen automatically if you have things set up and he falls below whatever your standards there are. He would show up with a warning. The big thing to remember is we can do that. We can have those things automatically calculate and throw errors here, but it's something that requires a lot of human judgment to really manage properly. So we will show you all these details, but then those judgment calls come down to you. So that's really the best way of thinking about what we're doing here. We're not going to be able to define things so that we get every detail correct for every student in every possible outcome, So it's good to use what we have there and then apply your own professional judgment there. We've gone through a number of different components here for financial aid. We talked through the whole aid process so you can get an idea of how that works. The big thing that you really need to set up are just those award types with a corresponding liability account so that your accounting is right on the back end. Then with aid applications, aid year schedules, all those different things that we look at. So things you'll probably want to think about setting up that are available to you there so that you can manage aid in a way that makes sense for your institution. A lot of those things aren't required, but they're nice to have. And of course, we've seen them in a pretty high level flyby. But the idea here is that now you know it's there and you'd be able to go dig in greater and greater detail or get back to us with questions about, what a particular item will do and how you can use it for your institution. That covers everything that we wanted to get to today, looking at the basic process of financial aid and then what you need to set up in order to manage financial aid there. Since you're watching a video, maybe you're on YouTube, you can go click the subscribe there. You can also, once you've clicked that subscribe, turn on notifications by clicking that little notifications bell, ding, ding, ding. Also, sometimes it gets pretty lonely out here on YouTube. And, if you like the video, go ahead and click like. What's the harm? Lets us know you think we're doing okay. Thanks for watching. Thanks for using Populi. I'm Josh. You've been great. Bye.